All right, welcome everyone to the Chicago Football Connection podcast. I'm your host, Steve Letizio. Follow me on Twitter at CC Bears. Joined by my co-host, Luke O'Grady. Follow him on Twitter at Luke O'Grady. And Luke, the Chicago Bears have a new head coach, and his name is Ben Johnson. How are you feeling?
I can't even believe it. Like,
It's
I was
crazy.
I feel like it took me maybe a half hour of knowing before I really reacted because I had to first check, see all the sources were real. I got a notification from the Score, and I was like, is this just a funny wording about having an interview or because it was Bears bring on Ben Johnson as head coach or something.
Yeah,
But once
you
kind
gotta
of
make sure it's not Adam Schefter or something.
exactly.
Yeah.
But once pretty quickly, all the different reporters were coming in saying, yeah, pen to paper looks like it's going to be a done deal here, and it was man.
Yeah. I mean, if Dirty McButt is
did it.
excited about it, how can you not be excited?
But I know I was talking to my mom about it. My mom was like, "Is he a pretty popular candidate?" And I was like, because of him going back and not taking a couple of head coaching jobs in the process, and then every year having a more fleshed out, a better offense and being in that top five. I honestly don't know if there has been a candidate like Ben Johnson in my lifetime. It's the first time I can ever remember that the coaching cycle was people were Ben Johnson was interviewing them, and it was whoever gets him is going to be lucky, and it was a sweepstakes, and then everybody else will figure out their coach after.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that last week or 2 weeks ago. Whenever we did that, it was no such thing as a perfect head coaching candidate, but on paper, you can't. You offensive coordinators who have 3 years of success, it don't exist.
Call their own play.
They go to become a head coach somewhere else before they can have 3 years of success. So yeah, I think on paper, it's hard to say. Certainly the best head coaching candidate that the Bears have ever hired. I mean, going back even to some of the offensive guys they hired, like Matt Nagy. People love to throw out Matt Nagy and be like, "Oh, he's the next Nagy," but Nagy never called plays with Kansas City. He was under Andy Reid. He called plays for a couple weeks at the end of the year or whatever it was, but he would never. It was never his offense. This is Ben Johnson's offense in Detroit that he created. With the help of Dan Campbell and other people, I'm sure.
Right.
But he was
the talent.
At all.
Yeah, I mean, I think people were rightly excited about Nagy, because he was coming from the Chiefs and he had done some play calling to end the year that seemed like it kind of got that ship right where they were having some stagnation. And honestly, all the reasons that you would have been excited about Nagy are the same reasons to be excited about Ben Johnson, but it just feels like a way higher floor. One, you know what you're getting as a play caller. Two, it seems that he's able to scheme up enough trick plays and misdirections and stuff per game that even in an ineffective offensive game, you can sneak a couple of points, which is a steal. He's the play caller, and it's something you now don't need to worry about getting through your OCs or through future hires and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look at Nagy, that was you just drafted a quarterback, you wanted to pair him with a modern NFL offensive mind, and then build the rest of the team around that. And Nagy had his success. Some people probably give him more flack than he deserves, but he made the playoffs 2 out of 3 years. He had that offense probably humming as good as we've seen since maybe that one season under Mark Trestman. And all that to say that you should expect that or better with Ben Johnson at the very least.
The Bears hired a head coach that other teams desperately wanted, which it never happens.
I know, man.
That's the thing. It's we always hire Matt Eberflus. No one wanted Matt Eberflus to be the head coach. It was reported that the Colts were about to fire Matt Eberflus before we hired him. John Fox, when we hired John Fox, no one he was a castaway. No one really wanted John Fox. Matt Nagy, maybe some people wanted him, but he wasn't even the huge name offensive coordinator because everyone was concerned because it was Andy Reid's offense. So this has never happened. Maybe you'd have to go back. I'm sure you can go back 30 years or whatever, but in recent memory at least.
If you look at how people took the Eberflus news and what the Eberflus hire was versus what this hire is, this is going to be. It's night and day. I mean, people had to go find out wwho Matt Eberflus was when we hired him, right? The entire 100%. The entire NFL knows who Ben Johnson is, and it's going to be his hiring is already, no matter what, going to be the biggest move of the Chicago Bears offseason, without a doubt. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be the reason that you think the Bears were starting to get some good momentum last year in the press and like people talking about having high expectations for them. The expectations for the Bears in 2024, or sorry, I suppose 2025 now with Ben Johnson are going to be like get prepared, Bears fans. And like I was actually already thinking to myself that like I need to remember that I've been excited about the Bears before. And like somehow they always find a way to like maybe spoil it a little bit, but it's really hard to poke a hole in this move here today.
It was the right move.
It was the crown jewel at head coach.
We could maybe
and the last 4 or 5 years, and all the things that we were hoping were true. That he was enamored with the history of the city and the quarterback and talent of the roster and the capital available, which is still all true and makes the offseason still very exciting. Yeah. But man, I almost can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, in 3 years from now, maybe we'll look back and think differently. But given the information we have at the time, it's undoubtedly the right hire.
It's like this,
given all the information we have. Like,
yeah, and we said this in our group chat that like this is the kind of miss. If we miss, like I'm fine with us missing here. If somehow this isn't what it looks like, somehow if maybe like Ben Johnson's system only worked with a quarterback like Goff and with the talent they had in Detroit, and we find out the hard way, then we find out the hard way. But 3 straight years of play calling and offense that's been in the top 5 in scoring and in yards, seemingly getting the most out of every player on that offense is.
Yeah. That's the thing, putting guys in position to succeed, doing things that they do well. I think Chad Ochocinco tweeted it, or someone, I can't remember. Like, the wide receivers aren't just going to be getting some cardio work, on the field. Like, they're going to be running routes that they're good at running, and they're going to be putting it in position that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's hard not to be excited about it. And just seeing, like, kind of the names that are being thrown around for, like, his assistant coaches, like Dennis Allen for a defensive coordinator, that's a home run hire. Darren Rizzi is a special teams coordinator. He's one of the best special teams coordinators in football. Like, he's bringing in a good staff. Well, reportedly a good staff around him.
Yeah.
So, that's what I'm excited. I think it raises the floor. I think it's okay to get excited a little bit. I know Bears fans have been burned in the past. Like, we've talked about this, but like, I think it raises your floor so much. It raises Caleb's floor so much. Just think about him specifically.
So much.
Look at what his floor was with just objectively awful coaching, which was not great at times, but also not bad either as a rookie. So think about what his floor is now with a proven offensive play caller, proven offensive coach who can build a system around him. His floor is going to be, I don't want to get too excited. His floor is going to be pretty high, which raises the floor of everyone else. I think the other thing is, I think the Lions losing this last game really kind of pushed Ben Johnson towards the Bears, because I think he saw what his team's ceiling is if you don't have that top 5 quarterback.
Yep.
And he might not think Caleb Williams is a top 5 quarterback. Caleb Williams is not a top 5 quarterback right now, but he has a much better chance of being a top 5 quarterback than anyone else in the Raiders currently, or anyone the Raiders can get this offseason. Yeah. So I think that was, if the Lions went a little bit farther in the playoffs, I don't know. I'm speculating, but maybe things go differently. But I think he was like, I'm not going to win a Super Bowl with a Jared Goff type quarterback. I gotta swing the fences, and that's what he's doing.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's not to mention like the benefit it has for the Bears, but there's a serious brain drain going on in Detroit. They're losing this offensive mind, and they're probably going to lose their defensive coordinator as well. Yeah,
I mean, the Lions are going to take a big hit. The Vikings, we saw what happened with Sam Darnold. Who knows what their quarterback situation is going to be next year? The Packers didn't win another season. They won a playoff game. I don't know if the NFC North is as strong. It's not a weak division by any means, but I don't know if it's as strong as maybe we thought it was 2 months ago.
Man, it almost doesn't feel real. If you're Caleb Williams, man, you have to be ecstatic right now. He talked about it on the St. Brown podcast, saying that he wanted to be paired with someone that he thinks that he can, be like a partner up with for the next 15 plus years and really build something special. And if you're a quarterback with, the ability, the talent, the creativeness that Caleb Williams has, he probably isn't a coach in the NFL right now. You'd rather be hitched to than Ben Johnson.
How many times you said, you were double checking your phone to see if it was real. And how many times do you think Caleb Williams double checked his phone? He's like, I'm not getting.
He gets a text from Ben Johnson. He's like, yeah, right.
Yeah, fuck you, dude. Who is this?
Send me a picture of you holding a fork.
Yeah. But yeah.
No, it's crazy. I mean, it's. I think that I had already kind of almost like started talking myself into like what some of the other coaches would look like and what would it mean for the Bears. Just in that, like, Ben Johnson was totally the obvious choice, and like the only thing that really I thought was going to instantly like turn the Bears' fortunes around. Maybe not without some growing pains from other coaches, but because it seemed so good, I was like, it's just not going to be the thing the Bears do. It's just not what they do.
I was never a big fan of Mike McCarthy, but I was talking myself into Todd Monken for sure. I was like, well, we're not going to get Ben Johnson, but like we can get Monken, and then we'll be fine. But it was never like the difference in candidacy between Ben Johnson and every single one of those other guys is it's night and day. I mean, I would have been fine with Todd Monken, but I wouldn't have been excited. I wouldn't be excited we wouldn't be doing a podcast right now if they hired Todd Monken today. We'd be oh, maybe we'll get to it later this week.
Yeah, Wednesday or something.
Yeah.
No, but the Bears want to pick Ben Johnson, and it seems, we did the thing. It's exactly
we did the thing that no one expected the Bears to do, which was just be competent, just do the right thing, and we did it.
Oh wait, this guy's been at the helm of turning around one of the most inept franchises ever, and stepped in and took that offense from like middle of the pack to 3 straight years in the top 5. Oh, and he turned down coaching jobs the last 2 years and had his pick of the litter if anyone wants to go, and he wanted to go to Chicago.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like everybody that's talking about it that has like some insight seems that he was always kind of fond on Chicago, for whatever reason it is. It probably does have a lot to do with the fact that they are just an iconic franchise. And it seems from people on the inside that Caleb Williams had a lot to do with it as well. Seems like he's pretty enamored.
As he should. He's the future. So if he's not, I mean, he can't make the decision for you, but you have to make every decision you make has to have him in mind. Otherwise it's just not connected. But yeah, Ben Johnson could have gone to probably 5 or 6 teams that currently have a head coach and been like, I want to be your head coach. And they would have fired their head coach to hire Ben Johnson.
Yeah, seriously.
That's the kind of weight he had.
He left two franchises at the altar the last 2 seasons as well.
He was going to be the coach of the Commanders.
He was going to be and the coach of the Panthers. Both teams probably thought that they had Ben Johnson dialed in, and 2 times.
I mean, Ben Johnson could have gone to the Commanders last year, had the 2nd overall pick, so had his choice of Jaden Daniels, who's been really good, or Drake May, who's also shown flashes, and he said, or Bo Nix or whoever else he wanted, he said, no, I'm good. I'm going to wait for the Chicago Bears head coaching job to open because they have Caleb Williams. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean,
it just seems like everything's breaking right for the Bears, and
I know it almost it might be a little bit far fetched, although you don't need to like an official like types conspiracy for people to be thinking about these things and for like interests to align. But it seems that a lot of teams knew last year that Ben Johnson had his eye on the Chicago head coaching position, and it never opened up. And if that had something to do with Ben Johnson's decision to go back to Detroit, who knows? Maybe not. It seems like that was probably more team related, but it probably worked out serendipitously that the Bears job opened up, this year when Ben Johnson was saying, this is probably the time for me to do it. And it seems like Kevin Warren was the guy that kind of had to make sure that this was going to happen, and that Poles and Ben Johnson, maybe through back channels or through conversations of their own, were pretty enamored with one another, or maybe not.
I don't know.
It seemed like Ryan Poles loved Ben Johnson, and that Ben Johnson pretty early made his intentions obvious that he was willing to work with Kevin Poles to get it done. With Ryan Poles. And it seems like they just kind of needed to wait to get the green light from Kevin Warren. I think Kevin Warren probably wanted to be as exhaustive as he can and got the chance to do so with Ben Johnson going into the playoffs as deep as he did. But you can tell by the speed with which the Bears moved,
Yeah.
Saturday, Ben Johnson's eliminated from the playoffs. Sunday, Bears get Rooney Rule compliant. Monday, they got a new head coach. It really does look that, despite the fact that there were reports about the Jags and the Raiders and all that, it really does look like that everybody on the inside was thinking that as soon as this is possible, we're making Ben Johnson the head coach of the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I have kind of a I don't even know what this. I think this is absolutely right. I don't know if Ben Johnson ever really considered another job opportunity, to be honest. Because if you think about how this offseason went, earlier in the year, everyone was saying, oh, Ben Johnson really wanted the Bears job, but it didn't come open. And then it looked obvious that Eberflus was getting fired. And it was, okay, Ben Johnson is intrigued by the Bears opening. And then towards the end of the year, it shifted to, oh, Ben Johnson is really intrigued by the Patriots opening. And then the Patriots were like, no, we just want Mike Vrabel. And then once that happened, it was like, oh, well, Ben Johnson's really intrigued by the Raiders, though. It wasn't the Patriots. He's actually intrigued by the Raiders. And it was I think it was literally all just his agent driving up his price, which is good for him. That's what he should be doing. And then, yeah, as soon as the season was over and as soon as Ben Johnson could be hired, he was like, yeah, I'm taking the Bears job.
Yeah, I tweeted about that yesterday. I said, I'll leave my words if I'm wrong. But it really does feel that like the Raiders job was always slightly smoke and mirrors. Maybe it seems if you were Ben Johnson, you were saying, hey, I'm only going to interview with jobs I'm seriously considering. And he probably, deep down was like, I want the Chicago Bears job. And his agents were like, okay, you can't just go interview for the Bears job. If you want, because there was also some talk that he had a number in his head that he wanted to get. They were like, if you want that number, you can't just talk to the Bears. So find some other teams to talk to. And it was like, okay, we'll do Jags and we'll do Raiders. And he did those talks. And, we probably did have a nice conversation, like talking to Tom Brady and ownership.
Yeah, sure.
But it was more than likely just doing his due diligence and waiting for like the green light to be able to do his thing. He probably used the fact that all the reports were saying, oh, Raiders and Jags to say, hey, it's obviously going to be you guys, but, we need to make sure that it's not because of money. He got the bag that he wanted.
Yeah, and someone else said that he wanted insurance that Kevin Warren and George McCaskey weren't going to meddle. In it, and he just wanted it to be Pole. So, yeah, clearly they had a good relationship. And I think once he got their insurance, and credit to the Bears, they gave him the insurance, and also they ponied up money. We don't know what the contract is, but presumably it's a top-tier contract.
Yeah.
And credit to the Bears for ponying up. We give them a lot of shit. But they got this one right, so they did the right thing and weren't cheap. So good for them.
Yeah, it seems like the talk on the street is that it's going to be upwards of 50. It's close to probably 15 or more million.
Yeah, something like that. So
the top head coaches in the NFL are making anywhere from 18 to 20. And I think Andy Reid makes 18. Andy Reid makes 20. Sean Payton makes 18. Stuff like that. So it's likely in that range. And the talk was that he wanted some security. Head coaches can change quickly if things don't go well. So this isn't necessarily meaning he's going to be tied to the Bears for 6 years. But it looked like that Ben Johnson was asking for a 6-year contract. So if that's actually at that $15 million mark or so, it really it leads you to think that the Bears has got themselves an $100 million coach.
Yeah. And also, if the rumors are true that they want Dennis Allen, he's not, as for defensive coordinator, he's not going to be cheap either. He's a head coach just this past season. So that's going to be a top tier defensive coordinator contract. And yeah. Gentia 10, I do think we should talk a little bit about we can kind of maybe touch on that later, but I do think that kind of opens up the possibility to that, because I think another thing Ben Johnson probably wanted assurance from the Bears was, what are you going to do with your offensive line?
Yep.
And I think they must have said, yeah, we're going to invest heavily in the offensive line. I think that mostly means free agents. Like, do what the Commanders did last year, which was they signed, they extended Sam Cosmi, they signed Tyler Biadasz at center, they signed, oh man, I'm blanking on the other guard that they signed, but they signed another guard, and they drafted a tackle in the 3rd round. And all those guys, I mean, that their offensive line was terrible. Went in one offseason, went to great. Well, not great. Went to at least good enough to be an NFC Championship game. So I think the Bears are going to go into the draft with an offensive line basically already in place. I don't think they're going to be the team that goes into the draft saying we need to draft an offensive tackle or offensive lineman at 10. So I think Janty is absolutely in play for the Bears with Ben Johnson. With Ben Johnson, that's the only coach I'd be okay with that. Otherwise, I'd be like, just draft an offensive lineman. But I do think that's in play, and we know how much Johnson likes to run the ball, and I hope to God that he doesn't get away from that. I hope that wasn't just like a Dan Campbell thing. Like, we've seen kind of all the successful teams are, the run game is back. And it's not going to go anywhere. And Janty, I mean, the DeAndre Swift is trash. Like, and he was in Detroit. I think Ben Johnson's first year there, so he was very familiar with him. I don't think DeAndre Swift's going to be the guy. So, but I think that it is certainly in play. If not at 10, maybe a running back, in the second round.
Yeah, a lot goes into that conversation. I bet you the conversation that Johnson and Poles had was about like broad strokes how Ben Johnson looks at building the personnel of an offense. Does the Lions offense reflect exactly how he thinks the team should be built, or was it a little bit of these pieces were here, so a little bit of give and take? You could think that at number 10 Ben Johnson could go get his Jahmyr Gibbs, or you could maybe Ben Johnson thinks to himself, I want to go get someone like a Penei Sewell. Now, is there a Penei Sewell in the draft? No, and that might change something like where we're looking at 10. I think you're probably right. They probably do take some shots in free agency just so that they can go into the draft at least being able to draft best player available. But as far as addressing the running back position, I expect the Bears to be pretty considerate about it this offseason. Like you said, Ben Johnson is familiar with DeAndre Swift, and the reports are that he probably isn't the biggest fan of him. I would be surprised if DeAndre Swift is on the roster next year. I think another, adding a vet, adding a rookie, and keeping Roschon are probably your three running backs.
Mm-hmm.
If at 10, Mike McCarthy wanted to go Ashton Jeanty, I would rip my eyeballs out. If Ben Johnson wants to go Ashton Jeanty at number 10, I think I can get behind it.
Yeah, I that's exactly what I think too. It's like a good running back can really raises. We talked about the floor with Caleb Williams. A good running back raises your floor even more.
Yeah, exactly. He just gets you a good running back is going to get you 2 or 3 plays a game that keep a drive alive, that really puts you in a good position. Look at Saquon Barkley, look at Jahmyr Gibbs. Ashton Jeanty is going to be that level of a prospect, and rightfully so.
Yeah,
and
it doesn't have to be. Jeanty's really good, but I understand. If you don't want to draft a running back in the first round, I totally get that. But this is a strong running back class. That second round would be also a prime spot to get a good running back. Someone mentioned Caleb Johnson. Who's good, Omarion Hampton from UNC, RJ Harvard from UCF. There's a bunch of other guys too. It's a really good running back class. So I think with Johnson, you basically can chalk up one of those first 4 picks at least up to 72 to a running back. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we kind of talked about maybe if that was going to be the move last year, and they took the swing with Swift. I think Swift has been fine, but it doesn't. I mean, he's not the answer, and it seems that maybe some of the history he's had with Ben Johnson looks more and more likely that he'll be on the way out. Mm-hmm. I think that the first press conference we get from Ben Johnson, probably either Tuesday or Wednesday, likely Wednesday, will give us some good insight into how this came together. What the is it going to be Poles making personnel decisions? Is that going to be through the Ben Johnson filter? Just general ideas about what he thinks about the roster will probably all come out, and that'll give us some better ideas about what might happen. But I think people had kind of been targeting Jeanty as a Bears target for a couple of months now already, and I think now with Ben Johnson, it makes a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think a lot of people are saying in the chat it still starts with the offensive line, which I 100% agree with. It all depends. If they go into the draft and they have even one hole on the offensive line, then I don't think you can draft Jeanty. I think if they need a hole, if they have a hole at left guard, they got to draft an offensive lineman in the first round. Or if they have a hole, center, right guard, they got to do something. But if they kind of shore that up, which I think they can do in free agency, then it opens it up. But we'll see. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. We won't really know for a while. Maybe Ben Johnson was not a fan of drafting. What's his name in the top 12? I'm blanking on the running back's name from Detroit. Who knows? Maybe he wasn't a big fan of that. So we just don't know. I think his press conference will be telling, and we'll be able to dive into the Lions offense a little bit more over these next couple months as well. Because all I've seen of it, I haven't watched the L22, just watching Lions games. And it's very impressive. But yeah, I think a lot of it is kind of predicated on the offensive line. So we'll know more as the offseason goes on, and we'll talk draft and free agency with a more focused view now. That's what we can do, because now previously we've been talking draft and free agency, and it's kind of just scattershot. We don't really know what the Bears are going to be running. Yeah, but this guy's good or something. So we'll have a more focused view on everything.
What are the thoughts on the top line? I haven't really looked at free agency. Have you?
I was looking at it today. I mean, I would say Trey Smith is like the star. I don't know from Kansas City.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if he gets to free agency is the thing. If he gets to free agency, then it's an absolute no-brainer because he's already a better run blocker than pass blocker anyway. So I think he just fits what Ben Johnson has done in Detroit. So obviously that would make a ton of sense. You'd have to pay him. You'd have to make him the highest paid offensive guard in football by like a wide margin, which I would be okay with doing because he's that good. Beyond him, obviously Kevin Zeitler from Detroit, the right guard. So that makes just a lot of sense. He's just a stopgap, but I'm perfectly fine with that. Just he's 34 years old, but getting a guy in here is going to raise your offensive line's floor and bring some professionalism to the room. I think would be huge.
I know.
Drew Dahlman, the center from Atlanta, I believe he's a better run blocker than pass blocker, but maybe that's kind of what they're looking for. But he's also more of like an undersized outside zone guy, which is not the offense that Ben Johnson runs. They ran a little bit of outside zone more this year. I just was looking at this. Our buddy Q wrote a good article about Ben Johnson a few weeks ago, and they ran more outside zone this year, but the years before that they were running more gap man. So I don't know if Dahlman's a great fit for that, but there are options there. Like I said, you're probably going to have to at least use a second round pick on an offensive lineman at least to kind of round that room out. But you can raise your floor of your offensive line group with just the free agency and then kind of go from there in the draft.
Yeah. And the thing that's nice too is that we're not, I mean, you could, if you wanted as the Bears, you could avoid taking any really major swings at the tackle position this offseason and really just do the interior, which is probably a little bit easier to address than tackle. And, which kind of like frees up what your options are in that top 10 spot. I think, like in the free agent space, it also depends on what's going on with the free agents that we're letting go. So like what's going on with Tevin. If he goes, then you definitely have to take a couple of shots at the interior. If Tevin stays and you like what you have, between like Pryor and Shelton battling at that center spot, you could, I think even like Kevin Zeitler is a free agent on the Lions line. Like that could be something that you look at as being like, hey, he's got some familiarity. Even if he's like a little bit of a stopgap, you could draft someone a little bit later on in the draft and have that be the successor and still make sure that you have a pretty high floor for next season.
Yeah, I love the idea of signing any stopgap that you can, but still drafting offensive linemen. So sign Kevin Zeitler, but then still use a second round pick or a third round pick on a guard.
Yep.
Who can, give you depth, just in case of injuries, but also just kind of slide in 2026 right into the starting position, which is something like the Bears really have never done. It feels like it always feels like we go into the draft with a need at offensive line, and then we draft some guy in the third or fourth round, and then he sucks. Right. So like giving those guys some like runway, it's kind of like drafting a quarterback and letting him sit for a year. Like it helps them too. So I really like the idea of Zeitler. If you can't get Trey Smith, Trey Smith is number one.
Yeah.
If you can't get him, then Zeitler would be great, would be fantastic. Maybe even both if one of them's comfortable playing on the left side. I don't know how much money. I don't think Zeitler would be that expensive because he is 34 years old.
Yeah.
So, and he might want to continue playing with Ben Johnson, being in an offense that he's familiar with. So you maybe don't have to break the bank to get him.
Yeah.
But he also might want to go to a team that's going to win a Super Bowl, and he might not think that's the Bears in 2025. Considering he's older and is probably close to retirement, he might not want to go to a team who's trending upwards. He might want to go to a team that's going to win. Like if Trey Smith does go to free agency, he might be like, well, I'm going to go sign with the Chiefs so I can win a Super Bowl. Like that would make a lot of sense. So, but both those guys would be fantastic. I'm sure there are other guys too. I haven't looked that closely into free agency, but there's always guys who can sign. Like the Commanders, going back to them, Tyler Biadasz, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. He wasn't really a highly thought of free agent signing at the time, their center, and he had a really good year for the Commanders. The Commanders' offensive line was really good. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like the top tier guys. You just got to get quality offensive linemen in and throw as many assets at the wall and just see what sticks. That's just sign offensive linemen, draft offensive linemen, and then just play the best five when you get into training camp. Like, really, you can't spend too much on the offensive line.
Yeah, and there's also a world where Kieran Amagaji moves inside as well. I think there's people that were looking at maybe that. I think honestly, it's maybe a little bit early to completely rule him out at that tackle position. But he probably does give you a little bit of flexibility if you want.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this will be easier to break down too once we have an idea a better idea of what the Bears coaching staff's going to look like. In the next week, we'll get an idea of
we'll know
how Ben Johnson views the roster and what maybe what some rough ideas are about his roster building. Style is versus like maybe just what the Lions roster building style was. Get an idea of who our coordinators are and maybe like specifically what that might mean for the positions that we're targeting and some preferences and stuff like that. But like that's all that to say that like those are really good like little tidbits to still yet to have. Like getting Ben Johnson today is like the Super Bowl of the offseason. It really does feel like that.
Yep. Yeah, and kind of going back to what you said about like Kieran, like I'm not ready to give up on him. We talk a lot about how the coaching staff let down Caleb Williams, and they did, but they let down the entire team. Like the offensive lineman, like Braxton Jones, like he's been coached poorly for the past few years and still has been like pretty average. So like maybe with good coaching and a better scheme in place, he can kind of take that next step too. Darnell Wright's been pretty good on the right side. Imagine what he's going to look like in a real offense with better coaching. Like he could maybe even take that step. Tevin Jenkins, has proven if they do re-sign him, he's good when healthy. So like maybe with better coaching, he takes another step. Coleman Shelton is obviously not good, but maybe he'd be a little bit better in a better scheme. So I think Ben Johnson just raises the floor of the offensive line. Just even if they don't change that much, I think they are going to change a lot. But the coaching staff kind of going to raises the floor of the offensive line, makes it easier on the offensive line, and a good running back would also help out the outside line or good running game too.
I think
letting Keenan walk and going for T. Higgins. No, I'm going to say no, just because I think T. Higgins is going to take too much money, and that's a lot of money to kind of tie up in three receivers. I'd rather spend that money on the offensive line, but I'm not opposed to letting Keenan Allen walk.
No, I think Keenan Allen probably does get the opportunity to walk. Caleb Williams had some really positive things to say about him on that Amon Ross St. Brown podcast. And now with Ben Johnson coming, who knows if maybe he's willing to take a little bit of a team-friendly deal to stay here. He did say that he either wants to play in Chicago or go back to LA. So
I'm not opposed to keeping him either.
I think that's a good point though that you made about expecting some just natural improvement on the average of the offense is something to consider as Bears fans. You probably will see just a general uptick in the average performance across the team with Ben Johnson at head coach, just being that it's very likely to be a more cohesive and well-coached scheme. Mm-hmm. And with that, it probably closes a few more holes than we might right now be looking at the roster and thinking, okay, this needs to get changed. Like, if maybe he comes in and sees Shelton or Pryor and says, I think I can make it work with this guy. And if that's the case, then it's just that's one big hole in the team that at the current, maybe we need to fill that we don't need to fill that we think we might have to. So I think that, but again, that'll all be something that we should be able to get an idea about in the next week or so. It's exciting times. I'm excited to see what the timelines are here. I want to hear this guy talk. I want to hear him sit down and give us a good breakdown of kind of how this came together and what his vision is.
Yep. And I'm not a big press conference guy. I usually don't watch them or don't listen to them, or maybe I'll listen to them back. I know you are, but I usually can't get much out of them, but I will definitely be watching this one. And we'll be back. And then, like you said, we'll have a better idea of kind of what we're looking at, what we're getting into. So we'll be back next week to break that down and talk a little bit more about, and then we'll probably get into more personnel talk too, based on that. I ordered the 2023 Detroit Lions offensive manual, so I'm going to read through that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I'm going to read through that, and then we'll go from there. So thanks everyone for listening. Like I said, we'll be back next week. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, retweet wherever you're watching, and then we'll be back next week. It's good to be a Bears fan, guys. We're getting there,
man.
We're getting there.
Day that we look back on and go, man, things actually got different that day. I'm trying my best to temper expectations. It's hard not to be excited. This was the move the Bears needed to make.
Absolutely.
This is a stab at entering into that modern NFL. It's the first real stab, it looks like. Maybe you could argue that Caleb Williams was the first real stab, but this feels like the first jumping in with both feet.
Yeah. All right, one more thing, because that kind of prompted this, but people talked about when everyone was all about Mike McCarthy, talked about hiring him gives the Bears respectability. You know what gives the Bears respectability? Going out and hiring the best guy in the market, and that's Ben
100%.
Johnson. So if you ask me, that's what gets you respect across the league is paying up for a good head coach. So I'm glad they'd made the right decision. So that's, again, I hate Mike McCarthy. I never wanted him.
I was so
not to bemoan that, but
it's like the Sydney Sweeney meme. I was like so scared I was gonna be the guy like putting on makeup, like crying, like pretending that I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
I was like, Mike McCarthy, he's got such a high floor, but it's like, and I get, I probably would have been able to talk myself into Mike McCarthy. Like, I
would have done it, but I would have.
There are things that I get that there's a reason why he's probably going to be hired as a head coach somewhere, but I think that Ben Johnson was a tip of the cap toward saying, hey, we haven't got this right, and now we're trying.
Yep, absolutely.
It's good. It's good stuff, man. It's exciting stuff.
For sure. Thanks everyone for listening. Again, it's exciting times. We'll be back next week, probably all off season, because now I'm really excited about this off season. So make sure to subscribe.
Draft just got so much more fun.
Absolutely.
Steve and I are both doing building the board with On Tap Sports, so you'll be seeing a ton of content from us about draft prospects and specific to the Chicago Bears and how we think they might be a fit. So stay tuned and keep following along.
Absolutely. All right, bear down, everyone.
Bear down.